She's gonna go there.
Okay, perfect.
Oh my God.
This is where we want to be. So you all already seen a sneak peek of what's coming, but today we're going to be doing a brief touch on meeting goals, a project overview for those of you who aren't aware of the evacuation planning process and what we're doing for Lincoln County. Depoe Bay is fitting in because it is getting a priority area plan. So we are creating a big evacuation plan for the entire county, and then we're also doing a much more focused, localized plan for Depoe Bay specifically. We're going to take a peek at the process and timeline so you understand what's coming next, when can you expect to be seeing this type of work coming out, and where we're at in the process. And then the thing that everyone was super excited about last time is the hazards and evacuation routes specifically for Depoe Bay. So not looking at the county as a whole, looking at Depoe Bay, specifically the city limits is what we chose, and where the hazards are located within those limits. Hopefully you all will help me be able to identify a forest road to include on my recommendations, which we'll talk about later. And then finally, we've got a little bit of a Lincoln Alerts update. So that's what's coming. We can jump ahead to the next. I am kind of afraid to touch it at this point, so I'm just gonna ask you to do it. But today we really wanna focus and touch base on those hazards as well as evacuation routes. Little sneak peek, you guys probably already know your evacuation routes. You don't have, or you really have 101, which is good to think about and focus on, but we're gonna touch base and talk about how that fits into the hazard plans as well. Hopefully today we'll be able to identify a forest evacuation road, not that we can recommend as an evacuation route, like currently to use immediately, but that Depoe Bay can then use and develop and identify and start the process to get that to be a place where it could be an evacuation route. Something to keep in mind, everything you're seeing today is not finalized. The plan is not finalized, we are in draft stages. I've been writing up a storm recently, but things are still subject to change. It's still getting finalized. And having your feedback and information today and having you look over it will help to give us some more information to inform that plan.
Who finalizes it?
It's gonna be the team, and the project director, Amanda, has 20 years of experience in this
We'll
field.
get it done by the end of the year. I expect that this plan will be done by the end of December. Larissa is staying on this project for another 3 months, so we will get it done this summer. We'll have it done this summer.
Absolutely, and sorry, what's the plan, what was the question, who finalizes it or when?
Who finalizes it?
Yes, so it'll be our team, and then also Samantha Buck, who will be looking over the plans. And we're also gonna get, I believe, Kim's feedback on the plan before it gets.
I've sent it
You
today.
will have multiple opportunities for you all to make comments on them.
Yeah.
And then incorporate them all, and then the client, which is in this case Samantha Buckley, will have the last say on before we actually publish it, but we'll go with that.
Good.
So to step back, this is a zoom out. This is the Lincoln County, or the big project. Our client is Samantha Buckley. She is the emergency manager for all of Lincoln County. And for her, we're creating this countywide evacuation plan that details the mass evacuation policies and procedures for the entire county, as well as a broad look at what sheltering in place would look like for the county. Additionally, we're creating, it's okay,
I'm too fast.
8 priority area plans. So
It's like it skips ahead.
it's okay, no worries. So what's really important for you all to know is that Depoe Bay is getting one of these priority area plans. So that's how Depoe Bay fits into this picture. And we're gonna talk about what is included in those priority area plans in a minute. You can skip ahead.
Sure.
Actually, don't skip ahead, just go to the next slide. Perfect.
If you ask.
Beautiful. Didn't think this through. So this plan is going to contain these evacuation routes that are hazard specific. So in previous evacuation plans, often you'll do a primary route, a secondary route, a tertiary route. Because hazards on the coast are so specific and so different, and the needs are so different, instead of doing this primary, secondary route, we broke it up based on hazard types. So it's instead looking, what is your evacuation route for a wildfire? What is your evacuation route for a tsunami? So that allows us to be more specific and provide you with routes that are actually going to be useful. Additionally, these plans are going to have these hazard maps. So that way, Kim and your emergency operations center can look, what are the areas that are potentially going to be impacted by these different hazards? And that may inform in-the-minute evacuation choices that she chooses to publish, or the routes that the city chooses to publish. It will also have maps and tables with community assets. So in the midst of a hazard, an event, what are our shelters? Where are our assembly areas? What do they have at those assembly areas? So that's gonna be like, does this one have a cache? Does this one have public or restroom options? Does it have a generator, bathrooms? So that'll hopefully make that process easier to look at the assets in the community. Finally, this plan is going to have next steps for mitigation. So recommendations to improve the resiliency of Depoe Bay, and that would be things that the city can take on once we have left as consultants to continue improving upon the resiliency in this area. That makes sense to everyone? Perfect. Next slide, please. Great, so this is our process and timeline. We are already in phase 3, which is mind-boggling to me. But we are working on the draft evacuation plans and maps. So today you're not gonna see any finalized maps. I'm gonna show you a map of Lane County so you can see maybe what it would look like for your maps eventually. But all maps for Depoe Bay are still in their draft forms. We're also working on our public-facing deliverable, which will be coming out shortly. And moving ahead in the summer, we will be working on the final plan for Volume 1 for the countywide plan. We will also be starting on other priority area plans, so that's gonna be Seal Rock, Yachats, Waldport, and Lincoln City. Currently, Siletz and Newport are also getting priority area plans, so you're one of a lucky 8 to be chosen. And finalizing those written plan deliverables. Phase 5 is going to be in the fall, and that will include workshops, working more with implementation, and refining that plan. So this whole process of creating evacuation plans for Lincoln County, everything that entails, the priority area plans, the countywide plans, public-facing deliverables, lots and lots of meetings, this is not going to be wrapped up until the winter of next year, so end of 2024.
End of 2024.
Yeah, end of 2024. However, December.
No, yeah, it'll be done by December.
Depoe Bay may get their plan sooner.
Oh, yeah.
Because the plan is supposed to be done by June. But then it will get finalized over the summer.
And then, of course, you won't get rid of me, unless we hire Clarissa otherwise, you won't see her for next year. But we're going to move from this process into the next process, which is the natural hazard mitigation plan with the county. And we'll be also working with Depoe Bay to do a natural hazard mitigation plan for you. So the recommendations that come out of this document will be incorporated into that one as well. And the important part to know about that is that document, the natural hazard mitigation plan, is what is required to have for a lot of the federal funding opportunities that are out there. So what we're really trying to do is identify what all of those mitigation actions are, so we can incorporate it into that plan so we can actually have an opportunity to get money for it.
Mm-hmm. And something that I've heard coming to this
We already have one.
Yes,
Are we
we have to update.
Okay,
We're updating.
because I didn't recall that part of the plan. Where we're
It's required to
updating.
be updated every 5 years.
Okay.
So we're
That's
updating
great.
it countywide, coming this year, yeah.
And something that I've heard as I'm moving into this kind of public process role is that if it's in the plan, it's more likely to get funded. So we're gonna be including a broad range, a long list of recommendations, so that way you can point to it and say, we've been told that this is necessary, that we, so for grants and things like that. Okay, next slide, please. I feel like I'm a DJ. All right. Next section is our hazards and evacuation routes. We can just skip by this one. This is focusing on everything. So what we're gonna do is how we're gonna talk about this is we're gonna talk about the risk, and then we're gonna talk about the evacuation route directly afterwards. So you don't have to remember, okay, what was 5 different risks and how does that relate to 5 different evacuation routes? We're gonna go risk, right next evacuation route. If you guys have questions throughout this process, you're welcome to raise your hand. Happy to have this be a little bit more informal so you don't have to remember something till the end. I was really hoping that would be bigger. That's okay. So on this map here, this is your tsunami risk map. This was produced by Dogami Department. I wrote it down, Department of Geology and Mineral Industries. They did a lot of work on that, so we are using it. And as you can see, the yellow up there is for a small tsunami. So tsunamis are sorted into 5 category sizes based on t-shirts. So you have small, medium, large, and extra, extra large. The extra, extra large and large are going to be purple and dark purple, and where you can see here is that a small and medium tsunami is mostly impacting area around the bay and also shorefront. When you get into extra large and extra, extra large, that's where it really spills over a little bit more and goes further up. It also covers that area. Oh, I think this has a pointer. Haha. Oh, it doesn't point on the screen.
It doesn't point to the screen, it points on the wall.
That's okay. It covers that area up at the top and then also around there where the this area jumps out. So we can skip to the next slide.
It goes all the way around the line.
Ooh,
Stop.
sneak peek. Okay, whoop, other way. There we go. Perfect, so you already have these tsunami evacuation routes. They've been done very specifically for the coast. So we are including these in our plan instead of trying to redo work that has already been done. So on this area, the orange is going to be the smaller tsunamis and the yellow is going to be a more intense tsunami. And it shows where you should be going to get out of that range. So you're going up in elevation and away from the coast. It also shows the 5 assembly areas for Depoe Bay, which we just went and counted parking spots at, so we know how many people can fit in those areas now. So you have the one at Lillian Street, or Lillian Lane, Lane Street, Collins Street, Neighbors for Kids parking lot, and then also in Little Whale Cove. So that is your,
Sorry, I was gonna say, that's a real tiny parking lot.
there's the 2
Right
parking
on Highway
lots.
101.
There's the 2 parking lots at Neighbors for Kids. There's the one right out in front of the building, and it also has one around the side and in the back. So I believe it's 26 parking spots.
I can't say any of these spaces are large.
Yeah, so for a tsunami evacuation, you are supposed to walk through this area. There is not going to be enough room at these assembly locations for cars to be parked there. We just counted, it's like 2 cars. Yes, Joyce?
Could you give me those 5 again, please?
Absolutely, so they're up here, it's gonna be Lillian Lane,
Okay.
and that one actually doesn't have an assembly
Right.
sign at the top. We believe it's a new development, and they've probably not finished that one yet. Also Lane Street, that is signed, 2 parking spots at that one. Collins Street, also 2 parking spots.
Not unless you park at Paul's house.
Oh, is that your house next to it? Okay.
A beautiful house, beautiful area. And then there's gonna be the Neighbors for Kids parking lot, and that actually has 2 parking lots.
Okay.
So if you just see the first one, that's not the only one, there's one around the side as well. And then the Little Whale Cove Recreation Center is
Okay.
the final
Okay.
assembly area.
And I'm sure you're all very familiar with these assembly areas. They are really, and for at least 3 of the 5 are just the ends of roads.
Yes,
There's not even a turnaround at them,
yes.
so.
And based on what we've seen, people should really know their tsunami evacuation routes before you have 15 minutes to be going. We were driving around, the signs are small. If you're not aware of where to go beforehand, it's gonna be really confusing and stressful during that. If propose it, never maybe gonna happen, but also do know where your tsunami evacuation routes are beforehand, so that way you can know where to go. Mostly it's important to get out of the tsunami hazard zone, get into that green area. The assembly areas do not have caches or resources at them. However, that is a recommendation to the city for the future. But at this current moment, that is going to be an area to gather as a community to await further instruction. Any questions? No? Great. Next slide, please, Kim.
And I should say that those 5 assembly areas are the ones that Delgany recommended.
Yes.
There is no reason as a community you couldn't say, you know, we don't agree with Delgany and we wanna have, or we wanna put another one over here because we think the end of this road is actually better. We could add additional ones if you can target them for us.
Okay, so liquefaction susceptibility, this is relating to earthquakes. So the entirety of Depoe Bay is actually in the same level of risk for an earthquake. So instead of including a map that said, yes, exact same level of risk, we chose to include this liquefaction susceptibility map. Liquefaction is when an earthquake happens, the ground, it's like going to become less stable and more fluid and will cause more damage to structures. So in this map, the red is very high susceptibility to liquefaction susceptibility, the orange is high, the yellow is moderate, green is low, gray, very low, and white, none. The bay here is very high liquefaction susceptibility. I wouldn't really worry about that. I don't think that's going to be an issue. But there is a lot of high liquefaction susceptibility areas. So that's gonna be in the south of Depoe Bay and then some in the north. Luckily, downtown doesn't look like they have any liquefaction susceptibility. So that is something to keep in mind and to look at. However, we can go to the next slide. If you do feel an earthquake, the time that it takes to send out a notification to tell you, oh, there's been an earthquake, a tsunami is coming, you're not gonna have enough time to wait for that notification. When an earthquake happens, the procedure has to be wait for the shaking to stop and then proceed to evacuation exactly the same as you would for a tsunami evacuation. Because there's not gonna be enough time for public officials to decide and then send out an alert to tell people to evacuate or not evacuate. The procedure just has to be earthquake, okay, probable tsunami following, evacuate in the same way. Hopefully not, of course. However, this is one of those things where better to be safe than to chance it in another fashion. Any questions about that? Right, we can skip to the next slide. And I put that, that map in again. I did cut it in half because I was hoping to make it a little bit bigger, so hopefully you can still see it. So in this kind of situation, you would be more than welcome to go to one of those assembly areas again. But once again, there currently are not caches of resources located at those areas. However, that would be a recommendation to the city to co-locate caches at assembly areas.
And in this case, Little Whale Cove actually has a fairly high liquefaction threat. And yet the assembly area there is, so that would be an interesting question as far as its structural stability if there was an extreme earthquake.
Next slide, please. All right, so this is the wildfire risk map. Blue is low, which is fantastic. Yellow is medium risk, so that area up in the northeast quadrant of Depoe Bay, there's a lot of trees around that area. It's very possibly why that area is at medium risk. However, it's important to note, yeah, it's a new subdivision. It's important to note that even areas that have very low wildfire risk, if conditions are right, if it's been very hot for a long time, if it's been very dry for a long time, if it's been windy, they can still get big wildfires, which we used to not think that the coast ever had wildfires. We're now starting to realize that it is a potential. So we are really including this one and taking it seriously. If we could go to the next slide. Because this one was so low, we also included a burn probability map. Very low burn probability, which is great. However, these are the places that have a lot of trees in the area, which have a potential to catch fire through wildfire, which then could jump to structural fire. Depoe Bay is very beautiful and you all have many, many trees here, which is lovely. However, that wildland-urbans interface where the trees are right next to the homes can lead wildfires to jump into structural fire and damage city in those ways. Any questions? Nope. Next slide, please. So this is the map where you all probably actually know what's going to happen. You have north and south on Highway 101. So if a wildfire is in the north, you would go south. So you would probably hear from the EOC, so the Emergency Operations Center, the city staff, Kim, who's staffing the EOC, would send out information to tell you to go in the direction opposite of that. So that would be either north or to the south. And here we've also included assembly areas. So these are places where you could stop and get information. What we would recommend would be to stop and get information at these locations before heading out of town if you needed further information. So if you knew that there was a wildfire but you weren't quite sure where to evacuate to, this would be an area where we would recommend staff to be or someone to be located here to tell people, hey, we're telling people to go to this location so that they can meet up with friends and family in a different part of the county. Yes, Joyce.
So if you have like Neighbors for Kids as an assembly area
Yes,
and it's 3 o'clock in the morning,
yes.
so someone would go there to give information, and how would they receive the information as to how to tell people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So Neighbors for Kids is actually not one of our assembly areas for wildfire. That is specifically.
And I just had
As
that
an example.
Yeah, oh yeah,
Any of them,
Okay.
any of them.
That would be a recommendation for us to give to the city, for the city to staff and figure out how to deploy those types of information at assembly areas. That would be for people who weren't able to get information on their cell phones or, does that answer your question a little more?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully those people would be pre-identified, would be going to staff those areas and already have open channels of communication with the city. And it might be part of the city, people who are already working for the city or perhaps are on city council.
Someone on the emergency preparedness committee maybe sent with a radio.
About
Yeah,
evacuating
Yeah,
themselves.
we do have radios, yeah.
So for this one, we included these assembly areas. We have the one at the north, the one at the south. Those are your state scenic viewpoints. We just went and counted cars out there. They each take like 30 to 60 cars in them, depending on how close you park them. Additionally, they are great for helicopter landing and they have public bathrooms. So those seem like pretty ideal locations to have assembly areas if you're sending people out of the city further and you need to have a place to check in with them and touch base. Additionally, there's that one by the harbor. And while that might not make a lot of sense for Depoe Bay to be evacuating, that would be a great assembly location if you needed to touch base and send out resources to the community for a type of, like for the storm, if you needed to have people come and meet and gather. Or what really we're seeing this being used as is for if Newport is evacuating or if Lincoln County or Lincoln City is evacuating, they could send their people to here potentially, or to either of those locations as a place to meet up and connect with their community. And that one in the middle by the harbor, right next to Community Hall, generator there, has a lot of parking spaces, lots of fuel. So that's maybe what we're envisioning for that. However, what we will include at the end of this Depoe Bay plan is a giant appendix and list of all these assembly areas in the entire county. So that Kim could say, oh, we have to evacuate, let's reference this list and we'll look at what areas are in Newport. Oh, there's the fairgrounds, we now know that they have public bathrooms and that they have this type of generator and this, blah, 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 blah. So that way, whoever needs to decide that Depoe Bay needs to evacuate has this list and is able to say, these are the places that we're going to go. And that's gonna be super easy, super pre-planned ahead of time. Potentially, the city might have to create memorandums of understanding with different organizations to really figure that out, but that is something that we are recommending that they do so that ahead of time, we know these are the places we're able to evacuate to. Yes?
So I have a question about, you mentioned the communications coming from the EOC in Depoe Bay.
Yes.
Are you anticipating, or is there a process for radio communications over ham radio with the auxiliary communication service? How can we tie into the communications as they're coming across?
Are you the ham radio operators?
I am a ham radio operator.
Okay,
yes.
perfect, yes. That is a good question. I believe that most communication will be done through Lincoln Alerts. However, there is a strong radio presence in Depoe Bay. So if you were interested in creating those types of alerts, I heard that it worked really well. You were in Little Whale Cove.
Yes.
Yes, your radio alerts through the storm seemed very helpful to people. So if somehow you could connect with the city to do that type of work, that seems like that would be useful.
We have an emergency operations.
Right, Michael
communications
Dane
center.
runs the-
Michael Dane,
yeah,
yeah,
if
he's our guy.
Right, okay,
So our, part of our plan will be getting the messages to him
right.
to help him disseminate them, right, or to assist him in.
And just knowing what frequency he would be communicating on would be really helpful.
There's seven.
7, isn't it? 7.
Oh, channel 7.
Yeah, and you can hear him on it all the time,
All
so.
Good, very good, thank you.
And the county also has a cell on wheels, it's called a cow. So if you ever actually ask them about it, I actually saw them last week at the evacuation assembly point exercise that was held at the Newport Municipal Airport. And so that is actually in Newport and is a resource that can be transferred to wherever it is needed during a disaster. So if it was a localized incident in Newport and the cell service was out, or in Depoe Bay, then they could bring it down here. Of course, if it's countywide, then the county is gonna have to decide where it's needed the most, and that may or may not be at the airport, or they could be calling in people from FEMA and from elsewhere on the state to come in and help. But it is definitely a resource that is gonna be able to be deployed.
Maybe we'll get our own cow.
And you can get your own cow. So that is actually one of the things that the Office of Resilience and Emergency Management is accepting grants for. So next year, they're gonna reopen that grant, and that could be something that you
That's
apply for.
Aspire, right?
You could apply for a grant for them, and then you can have your own cow, and OREM helps you maintain it, which is great, so it's having a pretty expensive piece of equipment, but the state is willing to help maintain it, which is wonderful. And that unit actually provides additional cell service for a mile radius, so a 2 miles circle.
I wouldn't have had to leave. I had cell service.
It's pretty amazing, as well as Wi-Fi and
Wi-Fi.
and satellite service. So it can really help expand your capacity.
And will that be somehow designated for a particular carrier, or does that just become a generic? In other words, anybody, no matter who your carrier is, would have access to that if you're within that 2 mile radius?
Its default is FirstNet, which is a national first responders network, but it can connect to any of the carriers that are around. So if you place it at the base of a tower for AT&T, but AT&T's tower's dead, but they could plug it in and it will run AT&T. That's what OREM told me.
Okay, so it's primarily gonna be for the emergency?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's primarily
which is still
FirstNet.
really valuable, not like.
Yeah, I sat on, we used it as part of the exercise, and everybody who was there could use their Wi-Fi on it.
Oh.
So it's public Wi-Fi. And so even though they may be only on a FirstNet cell line, they can, the Wi-Fi will be accessible to everybody,
Oh, wow.
And that Wi-Fi is the mile radius?
which is pretty cool.
Wow.
So yeah, a cow
New
for
toy.
Depoe Bay would pretty much hit most of the city.
It should, yeah. That'd be good.
Perfect. Oh, and I guess if you got that, then you would be able to send like alerts
Right.
through that type of situation.
And the city is working with Lincoln County to get on their program, Everbridge. So, it's a better alert system. You can opt in, you can opt out. We're gonna put signs up that encourage our tourists when they're here to opt in. And this will be a good way to disseminate our own individual messages as well. We have a keyword called, are you ready for this? Our keyword is Depoe Bay.
All caps, no spaces.
All caps, no spaces.
All cows, no spaces.
So, I'm getting the final details from Samantha with,
Oh, I
and
have actually.
hopefully we'll be able to roll that out. I'm hoping that I'll have information to provide at the Juneteenth event, so, you know, how to opt in and all that stuff. So that'll be a nice way for communication for folks, so. And it's like, once you opt in, it's just interrupts but then Lincoln County, iPaws and things like that will interrupt if they need to, if you're within the range of that, so.
So the Everbridge is Lincoln Alerts. Everbridge is like a national platform, that big name. Lincoln Alerts is what Lincoln County is calling Everbridge to make it much more like understandable as
We're
to
calling
what
it
is.
Everbridge.
Okay, sorry. It is Everbridge.
Yeah, but that does get a little confusing, because people are like, well, I've signed up for Lincoln Alerts, but I haven't signed up for Everbridge. No, they're the same thing.
Right, the same
They're the
thing,
same
but.
They're the same thing.
And with this, the city will be able to send information via text to your phone that would be able to say like, hey, Community Hall is operating as a warming shelter during this winter storm. Come here if you need this type of resource. So iPause is much broader. It really targets like a very broad area. That's what Samantha Buckley, the emergency manager of the county, would be sending out big information, and it's not super specific, not super targeted. Kim could use the Depoe Bay, Lincoln Alerts, or Everbridge to send very specific information to residents of Depoe Bay about detailed things that you need to know.
Mhm.
We'll touch base on that a little bit more later. We can go to the next hazard. So this is actually landslide risk. So dark blue is going to be very high landslide susceptibility. Green is high, I can't tell what that color is, but like more white, maybe off green, moderate. White is low. So on this map, you can see that in the south, there is some susceptibility, some very high and high landslide susceptibility, and that if that were to happen, that may impact Highway 101. There's some high landslide susceptibility behind downtown Depoe Bay, and then in the north, right where that new development is very high landslide susceptibility. There is actually unlikely to be an instance where a landslide is necessitating an evacuation. Landslides can be caused from wildfire and root disruption, can be caused from wind, storms, thank you. That one, absolutely, and earthquakes. So instead of having a landslide evacuation route, we are going to include landslide risk on all other evacuation routes. So that way you can see, hey, this evacuation route has this potential landslide area. Maybe we should go check that out before we send people on that evacuation route. Next slide, please. Yes, risk will be on all other evacuation maps. Next is flood. This is my favorite map, you guys. You are not at risk for flooding.
That's fun, right?
Yeah, so the blue is going to be your 100-year flood. You have a flood this size every 100 years. You have a 1% annual risk of that flood happening. It is basically the bay and backing up into the stream channels behind it. Because this risk is so low, we are not creating an evacuation map for this risk. We're going to leave it to the city, the map is just not needed. We're gonna leave it to the city to see this map and to create any evacuation notices for specific houses that they deem necessary.
What would be interesting on this map would be to see the areas around Depoe Bay, because they're all flood risk
Oh, yeah.
in every direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Depoe Bay is in a high spot, so you don't have it, but everybody else
So,
does.
you know, in a serious flood, we're the island,
Everybody's coming to you.
and
Yeah.
101 is joined the landslide.
That's the problem, is that a lot of them might not be able to come to you because why? Because a serious flood risk will take some of those roads out. The county, of course, the countywide plan has a different view of this. And they have a broader view of what they're looking at for flood risk. And then, of course, ODOT has its own flood map for 101, which focuses on where they know their biggest risk points are. Unfortunately, one of them is down in Depoe Sponge Bowl.
Next one. The Rockington, yay! Okay, so we're gonna talk about map finalization. Everything that you just saw was not finalized. If you notice my Sharpie, big Sharpie on a map, that was me, not final map. So this is an example of a final map. This is Cottage Grove in Lane County. They recently had an evacuation plan done for them. This is what you might imagine your map may look like potentially. As you can see, there's primary, secondary, and tertiary routes. We've already discussed, instead of having those broken into numbers, yours are broken into hazard types. So you would have like wildfire evacuation route, or tsunami, earthquake evacuation route, and it would look more like that. We also have touched base, your map would have landslide risk transposed on top of this. So you would be able to see, oh, this area is at high risk for landslide, this area is not. We also are going to include your assembly areas and shelters. I think both proposed and current for those. So that would be on top here. On this map, it's like the circles and perhaps the triangles. So that way when you're looking at your evacuation routes, you can say, oh, here is an assembly area, here is a shelter. Does anyone have questions about map finalization?
We do have a new employee with IPRI who is going to be taking on all of the GIS for the summer. So he is only spooled in this week. It's his first week of full time. So as soon as he is up and ready, we will have all him create these maps.
Yes, and this map finalization is going to be happening over the summer. Next slide. Okay, so additionally, we're going to be creating some other maps through this evacuation plan. We're going to have a map that is going to be all the shelters in the Depoe Bay, a map with all the assembly areas in Depoe Bay, so that is the 5 assembly areas for tsunami evacuation and 3 assembly areas, wildfire, and probably also wildfire, but for a different location. As well as a map with the caches in the city, potential islands. Kim and I were chatting, she's gonna get me your map that already has what you think potential islands would be, and then I'm going to compare that to all of these hazard maps that I've just shown you and finalize that. Additionally, we're going to include a map for the whole county shelters and assemblies. So that way, if you need to, or whoever's on the EOC, perhaps emergency preparedness, mayor people, sorry, Kathy, the mayor. Not mayor people, but who have to see the county and look, they'll have a map that shows where the assembly areas are. That would be accompanied by a table, so if you're more of a table person, you can read it on a table, if you're more of a map person, you have the map.
And this is something we really learned out of Otis. A lot of people were told to evacuate, but they weren't told to where to go. They had no idea where they were supposed to go because the assembly areas hadn't been designated ahead of time outside of Otis.
Mhm.
So we're hoping that by having this map, we can be able to provide people with more of a concept that if they have to go north, well, where does that mean? You know, not just drive.
If you look at the map behind Kim, it's one thing that we introduced yesterday at our city council meeting. We have our city in 4 quadrants, and so then within the quadrants, we'll have the islands that we're looking at. And we plan to take that to our meeting on the 6th of June. So we talk to the public and beginning to get them aware of what we're doing.
Perfect,
and
yeah.
assign points and things.
I think Kim was saying, hey, I could send you the draft map, but we're just updating it, do you wanna wait? And I was like, I'll get the updated version, so that's probably what she was talking about.
Right.
Can you just clarify the term island, what you're referring to?
An island is a term that's used quite a bit with emergency preparedness. If you have an island, say we have like 7 islands in Depoe Bay, an island is a neighborhood, an area where the people are maybe isolated, maybe not. The people get to know each other, hopefully. We have plans to meet with the different communities that make up the island. And within the island, who has medical experience, who's a carpenter, who's an electrician, who has a boat, you know, just to get your neighbors. And so that way they could share food, they could share, you know, skills. So that's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, to add to that, an island, if you really think about it as a place that is isolated from the other areas. So it is like an island as if you didn't have a boat, you don't have your roads. So if 101 goes down on both sides, the entirety of Depoe Bay would be an island in itself.
Or you might have the bridge go out, and so you would have North Depoe Bay as an island, and South Depoe Bay, maybe its own island. Or you might have something that happens at Whale Cove becomes an island. So it depends on the scale of this disaster. You may end up with 7, or you may end up with 1, or anywhere in between. Island mapping from the research point of view is often mapped based on the tsunami maps and where the tsunami is going to create islands. So it will create areas that are that are high ground with areas around it that have all been destroyed. So where are those islands? So that's why Clarissa said we'll be comparing your map with the hazard maps and trying to verify, and then making recommendations as to where to, with your input as far as where the other caches that you're talking about going need to be based on those islands.
Yeah, we've already kind of identified a big gap in caches, which is right along just north of North Point, along that corridor near the post office, and just there's really no place that anybody has put one. There's some in Stonebridge, but Whale Cove, I think Little Whale Cove has one. You guys have one, don't you? Or not yet?
It's not stopped.
Okay. Little Whale Cove, View of the Bay, you know, all these places have one, and the city isn't, we have one right here, but they don't have, there's nothing up there. So by doing the island and looking at the inundation zones, we were able to, they identified that particular area as needing something. And that's so ours might look a little different than what they're doing, because the group is focused on where can we put caches and where can we get the communities together.
Yeah, and that's a perfectly good way of doing islanding. The only thing that we want to look at in addition to that is sort of where are the realistic places that we know we're going to not be able to access for that group of population, for those things. You know, Newport, we're going north and south Newport. They're totally separate. Yeah.
Yes,
Does Boiler Bay qualify for this? I mean, I don't know, I didn't see anything in your information. It says the gathering point with its large area, it would be accessible with helicopters, so.
Boiler Bay, that's the viewpoint, right?
Yeah,
That is an assembly area. We just drove it, you've got public restrooms up there and about 36 parking spaces. You did, we did. That's why we were a little late. Yeah, perfect. Okay, moving on. No questions. I think we've been answering or asking them throughout, so,
Yeah.
oh yes, another one.
So just because you were talking about these caches, what do you anticipate the inventory or stock being in what kinds of things are in these caches?
Kathy and I just actually worked on this. bought a bunch of, about 200 sleeping bags, we bought blankets, we bought tents, a lot of supplies like that. And so we basically took all of, it was in 2 caches, and so a couple of days ago, we put everything in 1 cache. Our sleeping bags are in these great big huge bags that are sealed, because we thought that if we had cardboard, that would not be good in a tent. And so we basically did that with helpers from the city. And so with the other cache that's back there, we've ordered like $9,000 worth of food to go in. And so we've got that, we have life straws, community straws. We're looking on, okay, we know we need supplies, we need tools, you know, flashlights and can openers and bicycle pumps, you know, these things of that nature. So we're working on that list. And we hope to eventually build a cache inventory and just spread it out among the different caches that we have.
Perfect.
And I think I told you about the grant that we applied for. The city applied for Resiliency Networks, Resiliency Hub and Networks grant. Awesome grant. I told Ann about it for a little while ago, and I understand you guys applied for something.
We applied, yes.
That's great. But one of the things we applied for was a cache near the assembly area of North Collins, up in Stonebridge. Stonebridge has graciously offered to give us a little piece, not give us the property, but allow us to use it for cache. And we're looking at a bigger cache on there. And then there's another area we're looking at, maybe even the 20-foot filled cache. So depending on where we put them, will determine the size. The one that we're looking at doing up in Stonebridge is 200 people, I think. So, yeah, so
That's pretty
that's,
good size cache. And then the cache you were talking about, Joyce, that is right here at City Hall.
There's 2 of them back there. Yeah, and there, we thought it would be better to have something small than like a big container. A lot of people use the big containers, but we just don't have a room for that. And I think the smaller ones are a good size.
and they're more mobile too. So, you know, we have to do more service.
Did the daycare, Neighbors for Kids can actually apply for a cache? They had actually talked about applying for a cache.
He told me he was going to, but I don't know that he actually did yet. I haven't asked if he actually did, but he was real excited about it, so.
So, yeah, so to answer your question generally, caches can include a lot of different things. It sort of depends on the point of the location. If you have someplace that is an assembly area, you may not want to have tents and sleeping bags, say, because the point of that assembly area is to provide people with water and food, potentially immediate medical needs, and the tools that they need in order to be able to shelter in place or to be able to leave. But whereas a shelter location might prefer to have things that are really more for overnight or longer term supplies, so sleeping bags and tents, and then you get into the things that you might need to house people in a location for longer. So it depends on the need of that location.
Great. Okay, so moving right along, we were hoping to identify,
You need me to click?
I do need you to.
Okay.
Thank
There's
you.
more?
There is more, just a couple more here, so stick with me. We were hoping to identify a forest road to recommend for the city to prioritize. So that would be, we wouldn't say, okay, this is the evacuation route, we'd say, hey, this is what we've identified in conjunction with the city as the best option for a forest evacuation route. So that would be for a distant tsunami, we have to get out, or you don't wanna go along the coast, what are your options to get out of Depoe Bay? And so that would, once it's in a plan like that, it could potentially get some kind of update or maintenance schedule, it could get a memorandum of understanding, so, okay, we're allowed to use this in the event of a need for evacuation, this is what that would look like, it would have some sort of maintenance schedule, it would perhaps get paved in certain parts. I know Silet's right now is having a forest road that they're developing, and they're actually planning to pave the whole road, because back up there, it can be pretty confusing, oh, what's that road, what's that, they're all gravel, who's to say? If one of them is paved, what they've decided is that's gonna be a lot easier for people to follow out of. Yes,
So as you identify the road, are you also identifying ownership and points of contact and who the city would even contact?
Well, at least to a certain point, I mean, we can only get what the county,
Right.
we only have public information, so the
Yeah, sure.
county can give us like addresses for property owners, but they can't exactly give us necessarily phone numbers. So, then we may, and then, you know, honestly, as the locals, you guys may actually have access to these.
We already have contacts for the forest groups that have these access roads.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's not the hardest part, it'll be figuring out what is the best path, and then we can look forward to figuring out how can we make that a commitment with that property owner to allow us to use that, and then what does it need?
Right.
The Silet's option, it happens to be a road that goes through, the tribe's property. And so the city is gonna work with the tribe, and they're actually gonna apply for federal funding to actually pave it, so that people don't get lost up in the woods. But they have one specific path that they have designated as their primary option. So that's really what we're looking for, is if you know of a specific path that you think is the best option, we'd love to identify it in this plan so that we can move forward with that plan.
Yeah, question on Forest Road, do you have a requirement for a destination for this Forest Road?
It would be best if it hit a public road sooner rather than later, is what I would say, but on the other side of a particular hazard. So if you're saying it doesn't help us any if it drops you back onto 101, it would be better if it dropped us onto 20 or it dropped us onto some other road that's going east, preferably. Looking that if we're looking at trying to avoid the coast, we don't want to get dropped back onto the coast.
Yeah, but that's assuming that whatever happens, that you still
Didn't
have
impact that.
bridges and everything else on the 20
There are
and
lots of
18 and
assumptions.
everything. There's a lot, yeah.
Yeah, there are lots of assumptions on this, and one of the things with the maintenance with this type of project is your plan of action is going to have to be sending somebody to drive it to make sure you can even get through it. I mean, yeah, you can't just send people off into the woods, but the idea being that if you have an idea of where that is, you can send Paul to go drive it real fast.
Me, I wanna do it, I wanna drive around, I wanna go in the forest.
Yeah, I was just, because I was gonna ask a similar question, is where does this route supposed to go to? Because even that valley with 223 there is more prone to flooding than we are.
Right, it depends on what the hazard is and why you're trying to get out.
Yeah.
For us,
And if you're wildfire situation, you're
yeah,
kind of driving into it.
depending on where the wildfire is coming, again, right? It's all very incident dependent. So this is more of providing options. We're not saying you're absolutely going to be able to use this road, but we think that it's best to at least have an idea of what options there are so that we can document them and help develop them. And then maybe you can't get out that direction for a wildfire, but then 101's fine. Or 101 North may be fine because it's southeast. In that case, that's probably not a big deal. It's more if you've got the entire coast has had problems, then where can you go? Because you're more likely to be able to get east. You still may end up on bridges where you can't cross.
Is there a support structure that supports these auxiliary roads? Is it just one way? Is it two ways? Is there fuels or water? Is there shelter? Is all that?
So that's part of what we've been talking with the county about, and actually the county is now thinking about making a joint project with Benton County to look at the path between, say, Newport and Corvallis, and if we can actually locate caches along it, and then look at specific bridges and target specific routes that we then call out as primary routes to be fixed and hardened. So that is sort of the next phase from doing this beginning evacuation planning, since nobody's ever done this before. We're trying to look at what are the local issues, and then how did that spawn to the county, and then how does that meet to the next county, and then where do you go? Benton County is next year. They just got excited that Lincoln County is doing it and saying, okay, so we're next, right? Yeah, that actually makes sense. We'll move in that way, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So-
You see how the enormous this can be.
Oh, yeah, it definitely spills into it being a much bigger issue, but you have to start somewhere.
Understand.
I actually I'm delighted that we're starting local and then moving out rather than starting at the state level and going down. I think this is a much more realistic way of building it from the ground up and actually knowing what people know about where you live, rather than having the state come down and say, we're gonna do this.
We'll say, that won't work for us.
Then, thanks, but now what?
And the next slide. So when I plugged it into Google Maps, this is kind of like, okay, I was like, Amanda, can we get all the way to Corvallis? No, that's gonna be way too far. So you have to say, where can I get before then that will actually be more realistic. The Google Maps did not want to find out, it said you can't drive that way, but you can theoretically bike it. I don't know, it was weird. I was like, okay,
So if you can bike it, what it's saying is those are gravel roads.
so those are gravel roads. So you can connect up, and it looks like there's almost a connection point, like closer to the highway, which would be much shorter, and then perhaps like you're then on the highway, which is taking you to Select. So that's like away from the coast, away from that hazard. As an idea, we wanted to hear if you all had any other knowledge of this type of. Yes.
I just have a question, does the blue represent a boundary, is that a
That's a
river?
road,
That's a road, that's a path that Google Maps has identified as a potential path.
So does your map show rivers or roads?
It does.
It would, if this was actually on your phone or on your computer, you could scroll in and get really close. This is just pulled out, so it's not as identifiable.
Okay.
But we know that there actually are a number of different bike rides that we actually have had. Elena, who was here last meeting, actually has ridden this bike ride, so we know it actually works, or at least part of this, yeah. So we know it actually works. Whether or not it's the best path to define as your evacuation path, I don't know.
But that's to be determined.
Yeah, it is a gravel path though.
I was just asking, Paul's been here a while, and he said, which one did you actually used to go fishing, so.
Oh, yeah, it was back here
definitely.
on Collins, but
Yeah.
everything's locked up now, so.
So off of
that's
Collins,
the-
it was open today, is that 2611?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But,
And that's actually, if you're talking about the one up by Whalestone, that's where we're looking at putting our cash. And that's an entrance to the Forest Road, I know about, but isn't there one that just kind of, this one here, by
but
Indian
you got
Trail?
another one back here off of, Indian Trail.
Yeah,
So
You
that's
know
another
that.
contact point, is who's got the keys to the locks.
who,
Chief
the
Daniels?
chief does, and
We do.
you guys too, which one do you have the access to, the one here by Indian Trail or the one at the Whalestone?
I think I got them both.
So we have
I think it's
access,
the same company.
So this type of identifying this road in this scenario, you would also have to identify someone who has the keys and whose job it would be to go and unlock the gate. So this process is very much if, then. However, it would be an alternative to the Highway 101.
Assuming they're not a casualty themselves.
What was that?
Well, around here, our first responders will probably be evacuating too.
Oh, yeah, I mean, eventually, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Maybe they can run that, they can leave the
But,
caravan out.
somebody's gonna be, don't open the gate, their first thought is not gonna be opening the gate, it's gonna be, taking care of their family.
Well, if the first way they can get out their family, they may take a
They
family
might
to the
take the
gate
gate, right, yeah.
and then leave the caravan out. I mean, I think in that case, everyone is going to be in that position where you're always gonna be thinking about your family first and then your community second, but hopefully that together, everybody is considering this and you can bring the community with it.
we attended a really great presentation, the League of Oregon Cities had one on what happened during the Phoenix and Talent fires, the Alameda fire. And one of the things he said is that you have to take care of your family first, because you're not gonna be able to function otherwise if you're worried about what's happening to your family. So that's the guy that got kind of thrown into the incident commander position, never done it before. They haven't planned any evacuations, they hadn't done anything. So they got this fire raging toward them, and he said, I had to take care of my family before I could focus on taking care of the city. So that was a pretty strong message that we all need to think about, because we're gonna be worried about our families, and not gonna take care of the city if we're not, if our families aren't taken care of first.
So on the topic of the road, I'm assuming, and I don't know the area that well at all back there, so I can't help with that, but one concern I have, and I'm hoping that there's some model or advice that would come to from you all or from other sources in terms of, in the case that we have a road that is either gravel or that it's at least traversable.
Yeah.
In terms of how to manage the evacuation. Because we do know, in fact, that if everybody's supposed to get in their car and start driving there, that's gonna shut that road down so doggone fast, because it's not a highway. First person that has a flat runs out of gas, blocks the road, nobody can back up, nobody can keep going, and so I'm wondering if there's certainly this is not a unique or new situation. It'd be nice if there was some type of, at least suggestions from other places in terms of how someone would manage.
Yeah, I mean, we will absolutely include that in our research this summer.
Terrific.
I was talking to Dell from, who is the fire chief or the emergency manager from Newport. And that they're looking at an evacuation route between the community college, which is a shelter, and the airport, which is the evacuation point. And they wanted to be able to identify one. They have identified it, but they're going to post it and decide that it's going to be walking only for that very reason, because they don't want people to have vehicles that die. But that's only a 2-mile stretch, and it's a little more reasonable to walk 2 miles. He was saying, don't worry, my only job is to give people crackers and water and point to Corvallis. And we're like, well, okay, then how often do you have to have cash if you're walking to Corvallis? Is the cash is every 20 miles? That's part of the conversation, honestly, with Benton County, is how frequently do we have to put caches in order, and fuel depots, if we aren't even driving. And if we're doing along 20, should there be fuel depots that are demarcated along there so that they're in equal, like, yeah, it's a very complicated question that spirals out into a lot of other planning that's going on, because there's actually a fuel plan that's being developed right now for the state, and they are going to be requiring counties to develop fuel plans. So the next thing that's gonna come out probably in the next 2 years is you're gonna see them all coming back and looking at fuel plans.
At what point do you look at this and go, you know, land evacuation probably isn't gonna work in every case, what else do we have?
That's part of why they were exercising the evacuation assembly point, because that's air evacuation.
And caches.
Yeah, and that's why they're funding so much more robustly caches, because they're recognizing that really in so many ways, the coast is gonna be islanded in a number of small islands or larger islands depending. And then they're going to have to shelter in place until they can get out. And then they need to prioritize those people who have to get out first, and then be looking at just bringing people out.
And isn't that why, at least a piece of why the new recommendation to go from 3-day period
It's 2
to
weeks.
the 2 weeks, to kind of allow for air evacuation or
And
other.
in all truth, it could be a month.
Yeah.
I wouldn't presume that even 2 weeks will be enough, but 2 weeks is the best that we figure people will actually do.
Yeah, I think that's true.
The protocol for using the EAP at the Newport Airport will be the smaller shelters like this one, or the community center here, will actually be triaging the people who come to their shelters, red, yellow, green, and based on how fast they need to get out. And that may be a medical emergency, it may actually be a tourist that needs to get back to their children who are on the other side of the state. So you may prioritize people for different reasons to evacuate out, but then you'd send those people to Newport Airport, or you'd send them up to Boiler Bay, which is with this, they have a secondary landing spot there, or the one on the south, I can't remember, Rocky Creek, which is also a potential landing spot, so that people could get out, provided those places are safe.
Once you get in.
Right, well, and these helicopters are fairly large. They do require a minimum of a 70-foot circle to land, they could hypothetically land on 101, but they need a 4-lane road in order to land, which is why we were looking at larger locations to land. The port certainly is one of them, depending on conditions. The 2 parks are certainly available depending on conditions. You don't have a lot of other locations other than portions of 101 that don't have overhead utilities along this area. So your helicopter locations are, Life Flight has a smaller footprint, so it can land more frequently, but the helicopters that we're looking at are the Coast Guard helicopters, which are bigger and can carry people, require that 70-foot turnaround.
More supply, yeah, so there's the big schnucks.
We have one in Little Whale Cove, the Coast Guard is designated, but I don't know that it's for landing or just
No,
dropping.
It's for
Yeah,
drop
it's just
off.
for dropping, yeah.
Oh, there's two sites that were recognized by the Coast Guard.
2.
Yes.
That's drop off or landing?
Drop off, pick up and drop off.
Pick up and drop off,
Not
yeah.
landing.
Because if we could get supplies in, that'd go a long way to get 2 weeks shelter in place. This food's gonna be the big question mark.
Yes, and then I would recommend when we're looking at mitigation projects for Depoe Bay, you're not just food, but also providing an ongoing clean water source or a way of treating water either in each cache or for the city as a secondary water source. That, because water as well will be challenging because it's so heavy to move, you don't want them to have to bring in water.
Well, right, but we have, there's water is one of the things we do have.
Yeah.
Whether it's clean or not is,
But that's the thing, we just need to be able to clean it. We
Right.
have
They
one.
make mobile RO units that you can drop out of any kind of aircraft and you can, so.
Yeah, so, we'll be looking at mitigation options for extending your hardening or your cache capacity at a local basis, so you don't have to maintain a cache full of water.
Shelter, water, food, power, all except food experiences, so.
Medical supplies.
Medical, probably medical is not enough people.
Yeah, you don't have the resources to actually.
You don't have the staff, there's no, the EMTs are all we have.
One thing that we did, last year, we, picked up some culverts for the creek out here. So, and then we thought if we would do that, that might stem the water, put gravel down to go from one side of the city to the other, if the bridge is out. So we thought of that.
Do you know that the Medical Reserve Corps, that Lincoln County's Medical Reserve Corps? Lincoln County has a Medical Reserve Corps that are people who have put themselves on a list for the county to be able to respond for incidents. They have 80 members on the Medical Reserve.
So where are they located?
They're located at Newport.
Yeah.
Focus group, but I don't know where their members are, honestly. I think their members are distributed throughout the county. But their call out comes out of Newport. But you do have a resource that includes some people who hypothetically could even be life flighted in to help support a shelter that with medical needs here. I know that Silet's tribe actually has one of their caches is a medical unit that would support a mass care shelter of 150 people. So it's one of the things you could consider doing in the future is actually getting a cache that has medical supplies that may require someone else coming in from the outside to help you use it, but at least we're gonna be there.
Another option, and Paul, I will comment on this, is that if Red Cross has a wilderness first aid course, which is,
It's pretty
assumes
basic.
that you're out, you're within days of getting help. You're more than a few days from getting help. And if we had 10 or 20% of the population trained, so we had somebody available to do that kind of stuff and kept up to date on it, one experienced medical personnel could supervise a lot of people, and that would handle 90% of the injuries that happen, except for the real serious cases. Require surgery or something like that.
You could at least get everybody stabilized,
Yes,
and that would be the goal.
yes.
The Red Cross is focused on shelters,
Yeah, mass care.
and the MRC is focused on actual treatment.
Yeah, the MRC is, it includes doctors and nurses, paramedics, and it does have a number of those 80 people are administrative for organizations, but it is designed to be able to provide actual medical care and support staff.
On this matter of food, the Lincoln County Emergency Planner three ago, Jim Hawley mentioned that in the event of emergency and everything, there's no such thing as a fishing season, what's available, or hunting season, or anything like that.
That's correct.
So that's an option that people need to understand and remember that, okay, you're not gonna be able to go to the store, but if you can get to the ocean, you could probably get some fish.
And so just to clarify that, so nobody gets into trouble, you can't declare yourself that is an emergency.
I'm hungry.
Yeah, I'm hungry, let's go. And I think it may go to so far as the city at least has to have formally declared, so the city council has to have declared, and that it's an emergency and written the declarations. Before that, then you can go off and hunt and fish, but yes.
Right, and my point was just to make it clear that that option exists, and yes, it has to be fixed.
So realistically, our leadership in town is gonna be whoever is the least affected by something going on.
Correct.
And who has the sense enough to say, okay, we're okay, let's go see what everybody else is up to. And it's gonna be different depending on what part is hit, so we're gonna need people spread around the city
Yeah.
that can all do this stuff and not depend on city staff or anything like that.
So one of the things that the Emergency Preparedness Committee should include in their, we're gonna recommend that they include in their portfolio is actually folks who've had the training from ODOT to look at a bridge and make just a eyes-on recommendation as to whether or not that bridge is stable. They offer this, it's an 8-hour class. I took it when I was a city planner for Cottage Grove. It does not take an engineering license in order to take the class. So you can be part of the group that can review bridges, can review infrastructure, can look at a building and do just a check off as to whether or not you think it's got a different levels of stability, so that you know where your problems are. And that's one thing that actually is pretty easy to do. I think the state course is free. State Fire Marshal Office offers it.
Is that a Zoom course or?
Yeah, I think it's the State Fire Marshal that actually does it.
It'll be fun to take, and my son's a civil engineer in Portland, so he's working on Burnside Bridge.
Yeah.
Great, okay, we can move on to the next thing. The final thing we have today is Lincoln Alerts, and this is coming, okay, perfect, is Lincoln Alerts, and this is the up and coming way that both Kim as well as Sam is going to be communicating out emergency information. Who here is signed up for Lincoln Alerts in Lincoln County? Oh my gosh, okay, me as well. But that's great to hear. So there are two ways to do this. There's a very quick way that you can text 888777, link for alerts, all capitals, and that will sign you up for basic information about all of Lincoln County. If you also text Depoe Bay, no spaces, all caps, you will be on Kim's private listserv, and she will be able to send you information specific to Depoe Bay out.
The same number?
Yes, 888777. Yes. So as the community leaders, all of you in emergency preparedness and preparation, we think that it would be ideal if you brought this information back to your other friends, family members, community members. And there's another way to sign up to provide more information. If you sign up for Lincoln Alerts online, there's a way where you can input your own address, input maybe your workplace, and if you have any medical needs. That would tell the first responders if you are likely to have or to need help in the event of an evacuation.
We're saying you need electricity for medical devices.
Yes.
So part of why the county really wants people to go up and sign on online and not just sign on Depoe Bay is that then they could actually identify the people who have medical needs across the county and be able to send people out if there's no power outage or something like that.
So just to clarify, that would be the signing up online. If you go to the website, you sign up online, you're able to put in your medical needs if you have need of electricity for different medical devices. But the link for alerts, that's a super basic, super broad overview. And we are creating this public-facing deliverable is a terrible way to describe it.
It's a story map.
We're creating a story map that you can scroll through it, and then it will just explain how to sign up, and also what are the benefits, what are the different types of signing up, and that will be forthcoming. This is kind of the end of my prepared presentation. We went through a lot today. We touched on hazard maps, evacuation routes, potential shelters, assembly areas. Does anyone have any feedback or concerns? I know we talked about some of this as we went through it. Is anything else coming up before we all head home and on to our evenings?
Excuse me, when is the next meeting similar to this? Well,
This is actually the last meeting of this where we come out. We're going to be sending this plan to Kim and to Sam, maybe Sam, maybe not Sam.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely to Kim for review, and then she will.
Kim gets to approve it first before it goes to Sam. It's really your plan.
It's your plan.
Sam just wants to see it. She's not going to critique Depoe Bay's work.
Yes. And then we'll be getting some feedback on that, finalizing that version. And I believe it's up to the city and the city mostly, if you want the plan to be public or private.
And honestly, Kim, it'll be up to you as to whether or not you want to take it from, if you just want to review it, or if you wanted to bring it to the committee, or if you want to bring it to the city council, how you want to review it locally.
Oh, we'll be sharing.
I was assuming you would, but it would be up to you locally and how you wanna do it. And you, as far as I'm concerned, you could put it on the city's website, everybody can give us comments, I think that would be fabulous. We will be probably giving making a request for an end of the public comment period, at least probably sometime in August, so that we can wrap it up. But
One thing that is important to Depoe Bay and a lot of coastal towns, we haven't quite figured out all the elements, but we're communicating with Walmart. You know, what plans do they have, making suggestions to them, but we're trying to determine what we can do, not just Walmart, but all of the hotels and motels in the area to get them involved.
Yeah, down in Newport, they have a citywide recommendation that is to include the evacuation maps within their hotels. So that's a city thing that is making it so the hotels in that jurisdiction have to do that. We've talked to Sam about a countywide recommendation, and it might be faster for Depoe Bay to approve their own recommendation.
We're not actually looking at calling it a if you're talking about recommendation, we're gonna say, because
Yeah,
I put a lot of thought in my response to you guys on this, because if we don't require
it would be our recommendation to you,
to
for you to
require
require
them to do this,
that.
exactly.
Yes.
That, we are going to be putting that into place,
Yes,
because we can't, we've been trying to get Walmart to participate and they've not. So we either just say, okay, tourists, you're on your own, or we say, okay, tourists, we're gonna help you, but you've got to help us, these hotels and short-term rentals, by doing this.
Is that local
Yes.
management that's not cooperating with Walmart itself?
I don't know,
what's
House seems to be interested, but nothing's happening.
Well, they're part of Wyndham, which is a huge organization.
Oh, yeah.
And so they're sort of limited because,
The one of the four remaining hotel chains.
They are not limited in resources,
I was gonna
they're
say-
limited in interest.
I was gonna say,
They're
limited in
yeah,
thinking outside the box.
Exactly.
And where's Depot Bay? Do I care? That's
They
what
should,
the problem is.
I mean, I know we've had one person, one of our counselors had talked about putting go bags in all the hotel rooms. But that's a big issue, because first of all, who's gonna pay for it? Second, people will take them home.
Yeah.
It'll be cool, put them in your car.
Oh, yeah, those are
And then, so we've got, it's the messaging and requiring all of these folks to put this in their room, to require this information, to require evacuation maps, to require the communication and things like
So,
Years ago, Walmart did participate.
that. They were, I understood they
Years ago,
did.
yeah, and they were really quite involved, so I think it's probably changing local management
Absolutely.
that,
I've heard a lot about the local manager.
but it's a work in progress.
yeah.
so this whole exercise raises some interesting issues, and from an organizational standpoint, it's almost like we should kind of, as a town, figure out what it's gonna take to keep us here safe for 2 weeks, including all the tourists that happen to be in town at the time, and then have a link outside for messaging, in case we need some additional resources and stuff, but, you know, these islands that we're gonna create are good for centering things around supplies and caches and so forth, but it's gonna be, we're it, people.
Yes.
You know, if something happens, there's nowhere to go,
Right, realistically, we're gonna be sheltering in place.
or we're gonna have people sheltering with us,
Or, well,
and then that's even worse.
because I mean,
it's
the tsunami's not gonna say.
You know, if they evacuate
I'll wait
Newport,
till
Newport's got
November.
10,000 people, that's 10 times the number we have, so.
That's right. But what I've been hearing, different experiences when, like Katrina and different times when there's, the Paradise Fire, for instance, in California, people come together more so than is all for me and, you know, what have you, they share. And that's been the experience, so we don't hope that that would happen here, you know, that share resources is what we're hoping for.
Yeah, and I think the point of planning is to make that initial transition into sharing a little easier and to provide more resources so that it's there is more to share.
Well, and I think it's gonna be, you kind of wanna spread the plan, the training around so that whoever's standing can take over.
Right.
Because
Right.
we might not have any government to wait on, to wait for, so.
I always love Hollywood gets it kind of right, when they have the lowest person in the cabinet is the person who ends up as president. Yeah, because in my experience, the last 3 disasters I was there, the emergency manager for that community was not there. They were out of town in every case, so.
Well, and that kind of happened with that town in Phoenix area, the gentleman that got picked for it was not on the emergency, he was a public works guy, and he got picked for it. Because they knew he could do it, but the emergency manager for the county, was fired shortly after, was completely useless, so you don't know who's going to be.
So in a real emergency, my experience has been whoever's standing is the calmest person in the room that has some modicum idea of what to do is gonna be put in charge.
Exactly.
And remember that in a real emergency, it's a 24-hour operation, so you need more than one person, because that person has to sleep. So it's always best to be able to share the load and be able to share that responsibility information. So when we started this, we said that in the last phase of this project includes some workshops. Our intent is to come and run a tabletop with you on this, have a scenario and run a tabletop exercise.
Right.
So that will be sometime in the fall. So we will come back, but it will be in kind of a different format, and we'll do a tabletop exercise, which will be fun.
One thing that comes to mind also, and we have talked about that with our public works director, in meetings, is fuel, where is the fuel? How do you get it out? What do you do about it? So he's given his ideas and what have you, but
Yeah, and
that's a big deal.
recommendations for small towns, in every case, I recommend that you identify where all of your gas stations and help them get the transfer switch installed, which would allow you to attach a generator to them.
Yes.
Because gas stations require electricity to pump, so even if they have gas, they can't get it into the cars unless you actually have a transfer switch that will attach a generator. Most of them don't want to support a generator. Most of them don't want to pay that money, but at least a transfer switch would allow you to bring in a generator to them.
Well, and also if they offer the resiliency grant, that is open to anybody, so this would be, I threw a bunch of stuff in ours, by the way.
We're including that in our plan, is the resiliency
Right.
for our fuel stations.
Yes.
Our
And,
shelters, our water, our sewage, all the above.
Would you mind sending us just a list of the projects you included in the current grant, just so that we can mark it and identify it?
I tried to put the kitchen sink in, but they were not.
Well, and they probably have many more applications than they can fund, but they do intend to fund it again, and they intend to fund it every year. So if you're not successful about getting this year, including Wilco, who knows what will happen this year, but we will be able to continue applying for those items.
It's an amazing program, I do love you guys, I need to get back, because it's amazing. It was easy and I love the type packages, that was so helpful.
So have you had much experience with Starlink or satellite radios? Is that something you're recommending?
The county is absolutely recommending that every community have at least one, and I don't know if your fire department has one or not, Starlink.
I've heard that local fishermen do.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the folks down the port have them. Coast Guard certainly has one. So you will have somebody in the neighborhood who has one. I know that Otis, following the Otis fire, their fire department absolutely got one. They didn't have one before, but they got a Starlink connection. Because if your cell towers, even if they do have generators, those generators only last 3 days. And if you don't have the vehicles to get the gas back up to the towers, or the tower road is blocked, then your cell service, even if it did survive the incident, won't survive long term.
Kim, if you would switch to the next slide.
Oh, you've got more?
Actually, one more.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that is my email up there. If anyone has further.
Hey, what's mine doing there? What's mine doing there?
Just as cute.
Sorry. I'm sure, and this is an assumption on my part, but I'm sure if you had further feedback, you can either email me up there and I would be able to read that and include it in, or hopefully Kim would pass it along to me as well.
I would be happy to pass it along.
So you can tell this is really complicated and there's lots of stuff. So if you are sleeping tonight and you wake up and go, oh, I wanted to talk about that, send us it. It's not hard.
Absolutely.
Well, we pre-met Kathy and another counselor, and I created something like an ad hoc committee about 3 years ago after presentation from Jenny Damaris. And Kathy and I were just saying the other day, in 3 years, we just sort of like sat around at first and like, well, gee, I don't know, let's see what the fire department thinks we need to do. And so it just takes a while, but once things get going, they really do get going in these plans. And people like you really help us as well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been fun learning.
Did not know this was coming, and just Sam sprang it on me. It wasn't what I thought it was, the way it was originally presented, as what it would be, so this is wonderful.
Great, I'm glad. We are trying to make this as useful as possible, and so we've been really refining the process over the 6 months and keep changing it. I think we finally got it, yeah. So you guys are the guinea pigs, but the next 4 cities will use these templates that we've been developing in the last couple of months. And we'll move forward with those, so it's been lots of fun.
Happy to be the guinea pigs.
Thank you all.
We're gonna aim for Everbridge too, by the way, the Lincoln Alerts for Depoe Bank, so we gotta get that rolling, because she's testing out the system on us and how we use it, so. We need to
Well,
get
sign
that.
up work, let's sign up all sir.
Great.
It's pretty good.
Is it operational now?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
I just need to, she needs to get it turned over to that point where I can use it and get my team on it, so I'll have, some of my staff also, and, Paul and Brady will have access, but we'll be talking about that, so.
So when or how will we know to be able to sign up for it?
I will probably put it on the website and announce on Facebook, and we'll announce it probably on June 8th. I will have it, if you're planning on attending the June 8th event, and I hope you do, I will have it, information ready about it then. So, I think they're just waiting for the switch.
I've already also signed up for the Depoe Bay alerts through that. So if you can sign up now, they might just not be
Yes, you
sending things
can,
out yet.
right,
Through Lincoln Alerts.
right.
Yes,
Yeah, you can
yes.
sign up.
That thing that I just got rid of.